podcast. I am so excited that you're with us. We are behind stage right now, getting the final details set up as people are filtering into the audience. You know, this podcast is really about the journey of small business growing to $1 billion enterprise and what that actually looks like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But as we're counting down the last few minutes to jump into that, I thought it might be kind of fun to share with you a few of my favorite shorts that we have done over the past month. And this first one, well, it may have been inspired by some real life examples. Hey, I forgot to mention, but I need that market research done by Monday morning. But it's Friday night. It won't be that hard. You got this. I haven't slept in 3 days, but here's your research. Oh, I don't actually need that anymore. Have you ever had an experience like that? I know I have. You know, as we're growing this business, it started off very small. We produce only 8 units in an entire year, and now we are doing hundreds per building. And to give you some sense of the scale and size of those projects, let's take a look at this next video. Are you curious on what a $100 million construction site looks like? Let's take a look. This is the main lobby. It's 22 feet tall. The entire length of the building has a restaurant and coffee shop. It's gonna be amazing. Here we have the penthouse. Does it look like the renderings yet? This is the base of the crane, which puts many of the components in for our building. Up on 7th story, we have a rooftop patio and grill with views of downtown. Because of the height of the building, it's all made of steel and concrete. This is the underground parking garage. There's actually 3 stories worth. This is the 2nd floor amenity space that will view down to the main lobby. Follow for more CEO secrets. Norhart Oakdale is a massive building. It requires a lot of hard work to make that project a reality. With hard work means that people need to be well fed, right? Well, out front right now, as people are coming in, they're grabbing their snacks and having a seat as we're preparing for the launch of Zero to Unicorn. I am backstage right now with a bunch of popcorn buckets. But oddly enough, my eating habits are a little bit strange. In fact, I only eat 6 times per week. I am CEO of a $200 million company and I only eat 6 times per week. That means I don't eat breakfast or lunch. In 1 day a week, I eat nothing at all. But why? I want the benefits of intermittent fasting. And I like the extra time I get to spend on other things. Surprisingly, I rarely feel hungry, but that took some time adjusting to. Okay, I know I might be a little bit crazy in my eating habits, but I hope I'm not like this next manager. Does your manager only pretend to care? Good morning, Jake! My name is John. Did you get those reports done for me? You didn't ask for any reports. It doesn't matter. You know, since working together, I feel like we built a really strong connection. We're there for each other, right, Jake? It's John. See, I have this golf thing over the next few days, so I need you to work the weekend. You think that manager's bad? Check out this one. Boss, I really need your help on our project. Yeah, absolutely. I'll work on it right away. Thank you. Is he gone? Yeah? Where are you going? Golfing. Want to come? I hope none of our managers act like that. Well, if you're just joining us, welcome. We are counting down the last few minutes to our launch of the new podcast, Zero to Unicorn. It's about the journey of small business growing to $1 billion enterprise and looking at what that experience is actually like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, I'm behind stage right now as we're preparing the last bit of effort to make sure that everything will go without a hitch. But out front right now, we have hundreds of people filing in to watch the launch. But you know, the effort isn't all business. There's an aspect of this which is just personal life. And I want to show you a kind of a unique clip from our Fearlessly Unicorn series, a series that was inspired by my daughters. This next video was hugely popular and I hope you see why. Take a look at this.
Can I see your driver's license and proof of insurance?
We don't have a driver's license.
You don't have a driver's license. Well, how old are you? Well, do you know why I'm pulling you over?
Why?
Because you're going too fast. Like 6 miles an hour. I'm gonna have to write you a ticket, okay?
It's much too fast to be driving.
It's just a toy.
I know, but you still have to be safe.
Okay, Claire. I'm writing you a ticket for speeding for 6 miles per hour and for careless driving. You're free to go.
Have a good day.
Drive safe.
Let's go back to playing hide and seek. Yeah!
I'm glad the police department worked with us on that video. I want to share with you one more short that comes from our Fearlessly Unicorn channel. This video is literally just for fun. Take a look. There is one creature that is scarier than anything known to man. Some say it's more terrifying than Grumpy Bunny and his furry friends. Others say that it's fiercer than a horde of Beanie Baby zombies. The worst thing that you can do is let it say one simple word.
Hello? I'm not that scary, am I? Whatever, it's good for my skin.
I promise you my wife isn't actually that scary. Well, thank you for joining me backstage where you get to see what I see before going up front as we're counting down the last couple of minutes to the launch of Zero to Unicorn, a podcast about small business growing to $1 billion enterprise. I have to run now to get down on stage and you'll get to see one last little short about my daily life. And then after that, we'll patch you in to the main feed. Thanks for joining me. This is the day in my life as a CEO of a $200 million company. I started today at 4:30 by doing some work at home. I answered emails about being featured on NPR, a new show, a real estate deal, and our Mexican expansion plan. Then I raced off to the office. Here's the view from my desk. I had 3 back-to-back meetings with staff and investors. Then I was guest on a podcast, followed by a one-on-one, another podcast, and more meetings. The second podcast was interesting because it was hosted by a former NFL player. Oh, and here's Matt. He's awesome. I wrapped up the workday with one last podcast. I raced home at 7 to be home with my wife and kids. My kids are awesome and greeted me with this. I tickled my daughter and she got toothpaste on her face. We had a quick dance party before slipping into bed. I ate and was in bed by 9:30. I honestly love my life and get to do it all again tomorrow.
A launch party has to be great, and I just don't see it yet. What else do you have?
We have bags.
No.
Coffee mug?
No.
Space pen?
No.
Did you know it can write underwater?
I know, it's pretty cool.
Guys, focus. Wait, what's that?
Oh, it's some unicorn stuff that I got for my daughter's birthday.
It's perfect.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for those of you who are online joining us as well as we celebrate the launch of our new podcast, Zero to Unicorn. It's about the journey of a small business growing to a much larger billion-dollar enterprise. But see, this story is so much deeper than that. So many of you know us as Norhart, the company that designs and builds and rents apartments. But deep down, what we're really focused on doing is solving America's housing affordability crisis. You know, my dad died at a relatively young age, and it really reminded me how short life really is, right? We only live about 5,000 weeks here on earth, and I often ask myself the question, how do I want to spend the minutes I have here on earth? And for me, a big part of that is simply to make a meaningful, positive impact on the world. And for us, the way we can do that is housing affordability. Now, this problem is gnarly, right? There's so much to it, from manufacturing to supply chain to lean to all the systems that we have underlying all of that. It's immense. But there's a piece of the puzzle that took me a while to understand. And it's community. It's our residents, it's our investors, it's our employees, it's just our general supporters, because guess what? This problem can't be solved by one person alone. It can't even be solved by one company alone. It's really a massive problem that requires everyone to have a hand in supporting. And that's why we're creating all this content, is to build that relationship, to connect and build a much larger community. So today I'm so glad all of you are here and those online that are part of this community. And now I am super excited to share off with all of you episode 1 of Zero to Unicorn.
The unicorn is a legendary creature that for ages has been shrouded in magic. It has magical powers. It heals sicknesses, things that many think are impossible to do. It's something that is highly desirable, but difficult to find or obtain. It's a story of lore from around the 1200s, and since its origin, the word unicorn has gone on to name a person or thing that is rare or highly valued, whether that's a billion-dollar startup or that special someone in your life. This is a story of both. A business on the path to reaching the unicorn status of $1 billion valuation, and of the people who have come together in a special and meaningful way to make it happen. And that's where our story begins. It's not the question of whether the business will achieve unicorn status. It's the realization that it already has. This is Zero to Unicorn.
The day before we're opening, I'm really young at this point, and the whole family, my brother, my mom, my dad, and myself, we just lay down on the carpet of one of the living room of one of the units, and we're like, we did it.
That's Mike Kading, reflecting on the early days of what used to be his dad's business, Kason, a property management company focused on building multifamily apartment complexes. Now, that company is called Norhart, and Mike, who we just heard, is the CEO. But before we get there, we need to start with the story of his parents, Ed and Brenda Kading. This is Brenda.
Let me back up a little bit.
Located in Forest Lake, Minnesota, is a business that began because of her husband Ed's vision, Mike's dad. And the house she lives in, It was the one thing that they kept when they almost lost everything else.
You know, it's interesting because as we started that, and that's the name that came out of that, was Caisson, was the company name. As we came out of that, we gained so much respect of money. When you don't have it, when you're scraping for every penny, you learn to respect every penny and use every penny wisely.
And losing everything became the catalyst that Ed needed to jumpstart Caisson, which eventually became Norhart. With Ed at the helm, Caisson functioned more like a group of family and friends than just a business. That was the kind of man that Ed was.
I could tell he was really smart, very smart, and I felt pretty dumb. And but he really cared. I could tell he cared about people. So that was basically the first thing. He was part of InterVarsity on that campus before I was, and he knew a lot of people there. And one girl, you know, he was friends with a lot of people, and one girl was talking to him one night. She said, I'm not going to come back the next quarter. It was at the end of the winter quarter. He said, I can't come back the next quarter. He inquired why, and found out that she didn't have any money. She couldn't afford to go. And so he quietly paid her tuition so she could go for the next quarter. Stuff like that, little things that kind of came out later. We had many people that would come to us and say, hey, can we have this issue or that issue? And he was, together, we were very wise in our giving, who we gave to and who we helped. We had people live with us over the years. We had 25 foreign exchange students live with us over the course of 20 years, excuse me. People were in and out of our house a lot. The kids used to ask, well, we'd say, okay, somebody else is coming to live with us. And their question was, like, are they going to stay for a little time or a long time? Because it could have been from 3 weeks to 9 or 10 months. It was challenging. I'm not going to say it wasn't. It was challenging having somebody else live in your house. But it was good. There was a feeling of, hey, maybe we can help somebody. Maybe we can do something there to change their life or to just enhance their life. So it was good. It was challenging, yet it was very, very good. I think it was good for our kids as well in many ways. They got to see the world because the world came to us. And then consequently, we went to visit many of these people who had lived with us too. So.
One of those families who Ed invited to stay would blossom into a business venture based in the country of Peru. Ed was a guy with his hands in many pots, always tackling new opportunities and challenges that he felt intrigued by.
When I was really young, the Special Olympics were coming to Minnesota. And my mom especially, was into special ed, and she wanted to support the people coming here. And so the students themselves had a place to live for the Special Olympics. The parents and the families did not. And so my family actually sponsored and helped a guy named Pancho and his family actually stay in our house during the Special Olympics.
Which is what landed Ed and his family in Peru, tackling an unlikely project, with Pancho as an unlikely business partner.
A few months later, Pancho called us and said, hey, I got this great idea. Lima needs a cheap bus system. There aren't enough buses for transportation. If you could send us buses, then we will get them on the road. We'll get drivers, we'll make money, and then it will generate money and we'll pay you back for the buses. And because they had lived with us for that period of time and we had a good time, we trusted them. Now, hindsight is 20/20, but it wasn't a good idea. But we decided to be involved in that and send buses down.
And over time, this relationship blossomed. And they discovered that they could help people in Peru by bringing down buses from the United States and help build a transportation system within the city. And so my dad and Pancho worked out this arrangement where my dad took this really big loan to purchase these buses and then shipped them down to Peru.
While all of Ed's ventures were rooted in service of others, they quickly found that much of the time, their generosity was taken advantage of.
And then over time, Pancho and that enterprise were supposed to pay my dad back so he could pay off the loan. And the first month or 2 or 3, things were going along well. Pancho was making the payments back to my dad. And then over time, Pancho stopped paying. And this made my dad nervous. And he would fly down there on a regular basis to inspect the books and have conversations with Pancho. And everything kind of seemed right, but a little bit off. And it was months, my dad started to realize that he'd been taken by Pancho and that Pancho had the bus system running properly and was just pocketing all the money himself. One of the lessons he learned during this time is that, at least in Peru at that time, it was a kind of corrupt environment. You get what you can take, and if you can take it, great, and you're in a good spot. And so then my dad ended up taking Pancho to court, and Pancho actually moved all the assets from himself to his wife. And there's a law in Peru at the time that said that you couldn't go after the wife's assets. And so this went through the court process to try to get Pancho to return the assets to my dad, and it went all the way to the Peruvian Supreme Court. And even there, corruption was alive and well. And I think a day or 2 before the court hearing or the ruling, a couple of the judges were swapped out. And what they learned after the fact is they were kind of paid off to bring in people that were sympathetic to Pancho. So Pancho, because he had access to the money, could pay off the judges and get a ruling in his favor, which is crazy to me.
Didn't pan out as we had hoped it would have been, and we lost a lot of money there. And at one point, Ed had to, he decided that he was going to be an electrical contractor to pay back all this money that we had lost when the guy in Peru did not pay us back for the buses we sent down. So I remember sitting down in our family room on New Year's Eve, and we sat down and started thinking about, okay, we got this money to pay back. How are we going to do it? And he had a master's in electrical engineering, so all he had to do was to go back and take the master's test to be an electrical contractor. He just had to take the test and get experience. He took it, he aced it, and then he decided, okay, we're going to have to go and find jobs, and we're just going to make this happen, and we're going to pay this money back. So he worked for 3 different contractors on new home construction doing electrical. He hated every minute of it, and it was stressful on our family because we didn't have any money, and the money we were getting in had to go to pay back the loan that we had. I was working part-time, so we were living on a part-time salary, basically. So he was just determined, okay, I got to do this. He hated every minute of it. He didn't like working with the contractors, but he knew we had to do it. And so he did it. Very determined, very disciplined. So our kids were little at that point. It was tough because he was working a lot, and we'd go out to the job sites. And, it was okay. We knew we had to do it. We knew it was going to be in a short-term thing. And then it was after that money got repaid, then he thought, oh, let's build an apartment building. He came to me one day and said, hey, what do you think if we build apartment buildings? Now, keep in mind, he owned 2 apartment buildings. He bought 2 apartment buildings when he was in college. He had built a couple others, at least one other, with his brother in North Dakota. And then he said, hey, let's build our own. And I'm thinking, okay.
My dad got into real estate because it was something he kind of understood. He played with it a little bit when he was younger. He obviously had a small multifamily building. And I remember him telling me that he he had me as a son, and his second son was on the way, and he just needed to get a real job that actually could pay the bills. And so I don't think there was anything particular about real estate that just made him super excited. I think the reality of it was it was something that could pay the bills for him.
He was farming. He and his brother were farming while they were in high school and in college. Their dad had retired, and so they did the farming operation. He did that through college. The first year we got married, he was his last year of farming with his brother. His master's thesis was on building an electric car. So he was way beyond, he was a trendsetter, I guess, before electric cars were cool. So that was his thing, and he was building this, and he was driving it, and when we graduated, I started teaching, and then he was actually building the car independently, doing his own thing. He was his own guy, you know. He kind of liked doing his own thing and kind of thinking out of the box. Because everybody thought he was kind of crazy. He's saying, I'm building an electric car, and everybody's looking at him like, are you nuts? It evolved into a hybrid car that you see driving on the roads today. And that's what his last car was. So yeah, everybody thought it was a little weird, a little different. He was very disciplined, determined, and he knew what he wanted to do, and he was going to do it. If he had an idea, he was going to make it happen. Even if he had to learn everything about it, he was going to learn how to make it happen. And, he just thought he could do it.
Despite these intense moments, the challenges of building a business while growing a family and having a desire to serve is what kept the Kadings going. If this were just an opportunity to make money or get into real estate, it wouldn't have survived. Not because of the business model or the lack of opportunity, but because being a unicorn requires making the impossible possible in a special and meaningful way.
So my mom was a teacher. She taught during the school year. During the summer, she would come out and help, and she'd be out there painting or half watching us kids or doing whatever needed to be done, because there was only a couple of us building this 8-unit building. And again, that's sort of my dad's way, is keep the costs as low as we can and pull in the people he knew to help build these buildings. I remember one day my dad pulling me aside and looking at a neighboring building. And he said, Mike, this other apartment building, it failed. They built it too expensively. And he said it's really hard to adjust rents. But if you can drive down the cost of what you're doing, you're much more likely to succeed. And so he was so adamant about making sure we don't waste any bit of money. And so that very much was ingrained in my thinking growing up and my experience in later years. Today the techniques for us to driving down costs are very different than what he used then. Back then it was being scrappy. It was doing whatever it took just to get the job done and putting the energy in if you can. Once you get to a larger scale, it doesn't matter how many hours you put in. You're not going to have a meaningful impact yourself alone on these projects. And so the techniques we use today are more about hiring the best people, building the right system, the right infrastructure in to build these buildings at scale. But the heart of who he was and the heart of his passion to drive down costs is definitely carried through to us today.
Along the way, people showed up for the Kadings. And in the same way, the Kadings showed up for them.
Yeah, my mom had a few moments of looking at like our church and seeing the food, the food bank and stuff, and I think wanting to take that food and to use that resource, but I think for her, her heart is so much in the I want to support others that she never did that. She just ate. We ate the most basic food, had the most basic living, just to make it by during that time.
And even when times were hard, the right pieces and people still seemed to fall into place. Like Harry.
We purchased this property in 1954, my wife and I.
Harry is one of those special people who who paved the way for the future growth of the family business. Harry owned a desirable piece of land in an area ripe for development.
And she and her family had moved here in 43. So in other words, my wife had grown up here. And after graduating from high school, I went into service, as people did then, and went to college, things of that nature after I got home. And we were renting a place, and her parents were living here, but they were older, and her father's health wasn't the best. So they moved to a Ebenezer home down the cities. And at that time, they offered us the house. And my wife was quite sentimental about the property. And so we purchased it at that time. And it was a wonderful place for us. I loved nature. The family did, so we did plant a lot of trees here, and it became a very nice place for us to be.
What was an idyllic setting for Harry's family was becoming a burden with his wife's diminishing health. Harry had been trying to sell the land for a while, but declined offer after offer because he wasn't feeling like the right person had come along.
As time passed on, my wife started having some symptoms of dementia. And actually, I felt perhaps that it would be wise to look ahead. And I put a sign up on the property, and it was kind of well, it was honest on my part, but I don't think the people reading it appreciated it. I just said, so much for sale, and I'm, accepting offers. And I think they wanted me to say what it was worth. And I wasn't positive, even though I was testing the waters.
That is, until Ed showed up.
One day a fellow came there that I believe worked for the Catings. He had a heavy equipment operator. And he talked to me about the property, and I said, well, it is for sale. But the worst thing someone can ask me is, what do you want for it? The next thing I know, I get a knock on the door not that long afterwards, and it was Ed Cating. And he was quite straightforward. He said, I'm here at Ed Cating, I'd like to buy your property. And I could tell he was a pretty all-together guy. And we didn't talk all that much, but he piqued my interest. Well, I could tell he was interested in something for himself. He had something in mind. He presented himself in a way that I trusted him immediately. And that was the big thing. Other people were kind of wheelers and dealers and writing checks and leaving them on my door and all that type of thing. Hoping I'd cash it and then they'd have their deal. And I never took them very seriously, and that's why I put a gunny sack over the sign. So actually, Ed came to the door, and one thing about first impressions, you only get one, right? And that's what did it. But what sealed the deal was Brenda.
Within a couple of days of that, we scraped up enough money, and we purchased that.
Ed was right in there. Right, he didn't push the string, he pulled it. He's a hard worker, kids were. He did a lot of things with his own innovations. So in other words, you might say they were self-made.
This is the mentality that the entire family shared, because Ed spearheaded it. With this new plot of land began this new dream that would become a massively impactful business.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the podcast thus far. It's been super fun to create and put together. And right now, I want to share with you something fun that our company is putting together. And that's a new investment platform called Norhart Invest. This is a platform where you can earn up to 8.5% interest on money that you deposit into accounts. You can lock the money up for different periods of time, everything from 0 to 24 months. The longer you lock it, the higher the interest rate that you get. There's no minimum investment. You do not have to be an accredited investor. And there's a really awesome online platform that we're putting together. And so far, we have a waiting list of hundreds of people to the tune of millions of dollars. And I'm so excited to see all of that come together. So if you or someone you know might be interested in that investment platform, we'd love for you to visit norhart.com. That's NORHART.com, and click on Invest to learn more. With no further ado, let's go back to the podcast.
I had no ideas that they would expand to what they are today, but I'm not surprised. They're very capable people. I just felt very comfortable, even when I stayed well beyond what I thought I would. And but they were always cordial. And actually, it used to be a small barn on the property that I took down, and I had used that to put the car in. And they actually built a double garage with an additional place for their implements that they needed to maintain this property, which was extremely appreciated, so they showed me nothing but kindness.
After the break, the Kadings learn how to balance a burgeoning business with a growing family. The Kadings were in the throes of building this new business, all while they had a young family. And as with many things worth doing in life, it didn't come without its challenges.
So my dad is doing these 3 different jobs, and I think is getting burned out at this point in time. And he's always been the kind of soul that doesn't want to go work for other people. Even if he's working for himself and putting a ton of hours into it, that freedom and flexibility is something that he values. And he knew real estate could work, right? He learned the lessons in farming that it was really volatile. Things would be really good or really bad. But with real estate, it could be more stable. And so he started to have this little dream of, could I build a small apartment building?
We were trying to help. Okay, we were trying to help in Peru, and didn't work out quite how we wanted to. And, some people might think this is absolutely crazy, but I don't. I think that God blessed us in that we've been challenged financially. We learned a lot, and then this piece of property drops in our lap. And he had this idea to build an apartment building. And so it's kind of that. It was hard. Kids were little. It was hard. But we knew that we kind of just needed to keep moving forward.
But even in the hard times, Ed knew that they were building something special. So he kept at it.
I think in part of putting all this energy to paying back the bank, I think the banks actually became more excited about working with him and gave him an opportunity to build this building that he may not have otherwise had if he had not shown the banks that he was willing to do all that it took to make sure that they were made whole. And so he got the loan for the project, purchased the land, and I remember the original drawings of this. It was literally on 2 sheets of paper. I mean, they're larger paper, but he drew it all up by hand, what the building would be and the shape and size, and then started building. And he used like high school students and college students and just a mixed match of people to put it all together, and just poured a ton of energy and effort and blood, sweat, and tears into building the building, and then seeing it come together. And then I remember he was so proud of of putting up for lease and seeing the excitement and seeing it was just an 8-unit building, but 8 people come together and be excited about living in that building.
I do remember when the first family moved in.
That's Lucas Kading, Brenda and Ed's son and Mike's brother.
The big thing was we kind of got to the end of the building, and we as a family just kind of laid on the carpet. We were like, the last thing we needed to do is lay the carpets for the entire building. And once the carpenter left, and this was like a couple hours before the first family was supposed to move in, so the carpenter was there. And they were getting the last few things. It was kind of stressful. We weren't sure if they were going to make it in time because the first family was going to get in soon. And luckily, like just a couple hours before the first family was supposed to move in, the carpenter finished up and they left.
We all the whole family, my brother, my mom, my dad, and myself, we just lay down on the carpet of one of the living room of one of the units. Like, we did it. Like, we've gotten past this phase in our life.
And then as a family, my brother, mom, dad, and I went up to one of the rooms. We just laid down and were just kind of like just happy that we had done and we were finished. I know my parents obviously put all that effort and time into making sure it was getting done. And we just relaxed and appreciated the time as a family. But it was that first interaction, the first time I came to the Aplex, we got to kind of celebrate the completion of the building as a family, which was fun.
We've gotten to a point now that my dad is on a new trajectory and things are looking up for once in a long time.
I remember pouring the first slab of concrete down on the, well, at least for the garages in the back. I remember I was kind of just around, not really helping, but trying to, I think my dad asked me to pull up the rebar as they were putting the concrete down. And that was kind of my job, just make sure the rebar ended up about halfway into the slabs. Obviously, if it's outside the slab, it could potentially rust and decay. So yeah, that was kind of one of my jobs there. Other stories I remember from the Aplex, well, it's kind of a weird story, but when we were building that, there's actually a hornet's nest or a bee's nest or something in the ground in the back there. And I was, my dad went over to spray it to kind of take care of the bees. And I saw him like trying to spray him, but he's like dancing around. Like, I don't know, he's wiping his arms off from the bees that were like trying to get on him, because obviously he was spraying to the hive. And I thought he was dancing, and I thought, I want to go dance too, which is weird because I didn't really care for dancing or anything, but I thought he was dancing, so I'm like, I want to go over and dance too. And I went over to him, and then my dad's like, no, get away. And like the bees started kind of going after me, and then like he was like more protected. I think he wore long sleeves and pants, and I wasn't necessarily there to work that day. I was just kind of there. My dad was just taking care of something, and so the bees started like getting me, and we had to ran over into the Aplex and kind of took shelter in one of the rooms.
But there was a moment in this journey when everything could have changed. When we come back, Ed Kading has a brush with danger that nearly undid everything.
Wow. Well, I hope you're enjoying the podcast thus far. As we're launching this podcast, there's something that you can do that would be incredibly helpful to us. See, groups like Amazon and Apple have had interest in promoting this podcast, but what means a lot to them is that we're showing that we already have interested people, that we have an audience that wants to hear this content. And so if you would, for a moment here, just take out your phone and search Zero to Unicorn on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts or Google or Spotify or on Amazon. And then go ahead and click the follow button so that you're following our podcast. Download the latest episode. And then if you could, just leave us a review. Again, those follows, the listens, and the reviews help a tremendous amount when building initial momentum for this podcast. So if you would take a moment to do that for me, I would so deeply appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Let's hop back into the podcast.
That seed of an idea that would turn into Norhart could have easily vanished, along with its patriarch.
One of the trips down to Peru, my dad was staying in a hotel, and he loves to walk the beach. And so he would walk down the beach back and forth, just a way to get exercise. And as he's walking down the beach, this guy comes up to him, asks him a lot of questions about the United States, what it's like, what his experience is, and then disappears.
So he's walking the beach, and some guy comes up to him, looked like a druggy type guy, and he goes, "Hey, you're an American, aren't you?" And the guy kind of talked in broken English. "Oh, I'd like to go to America. Can you tell me all about it?" And he just looked like not a very decent guy. And Ed just kind of answered his questions and just walked away as fast as he could. The guy kind of followed him and then finally left.
My dad thinks, well, this is a bit strange. I'm not sure what's going on, but kind of puts it out of his mind.
About 10 minutes later, here comes this guy with two or three other guys. And the other guys looked like they were dressed in military, or not military, but police uniforms.
A couple of cops come up to him. They pull him aside and say, we got some questions for you. That man you were just talking to, well, he was a known drug dealer. And, now we need to take you down to the station because we're not sure whether or not you are related to this at all.
And upon looking at them, you would think that, but they really weren't. They drugged the druggy guy with them, and they said, "Oh, this is your American contact, and we have to arrest you both and take you to jail." And Ed didn't know anything. He didn't know that they weren't police. They looked like it.
So they take him over and put him into what kind of looked like a cop car. But very quickly in that car, my dad realized something wasn't right.
2 guys in front, I think 2 in the back, and then he was in the middle, in the back. And once he got in the car, he realized, oh, these aren't police, and this is not a good situation. They were basically looking for money. And I think he had suntan lotion in his pocket, and I think they thought he had a wad of money or something. He took that out. He took his wallet out, said, see, I don't have any money. Don't have anything. And the guys didn't know what to do with him. And Ed wasn't sure what was going to happen either.
They started driving down the road, headed toward a really bad part of town. He knew going there meant nothing good.
And before Ed had gone on to the beach, he'd asked people, where should I not go? They said, don't go toward the warehouse district. And they were driving toward the warehouse district. And so Ed's mind was always spinning. It was always thinking, and he could always calculate things.
One of the things he had learned is that as humans, we have about a second before we start to realize what's going on. And so he starts to formulate this plan in his mind.
He thought, okay, when the car gets down to about 10 miles an hour, I could jump out. I could jump in between the guys in front and open the door. He saw the way the door handle was. I can open the door and fall out. But he had to get down to 10 miles an hour. And then he saw a street light or a stoplight coming up. And there are very, very few stoplights in Lima. It's rare. At that point, it was rare to see them. But he saw one coming up.
That next stoplight, the car was slowing down. He was going to get out of there. That's what he did. He started to watch that speedometer go down and down and down. As they were approaching a red light, 10 mile an hour hit, he jumped forward, opened the car door on the passenger's side, and he used the momentum of that door swinging open as the car slowed down to pull him out of the car, all within about 1 second.
And he just started running the opposite direction in between traffic to get out of there. And I think he said he ran for probably a mile before he stopped. The guys didn't know what to do with him because they were just looking for money. But it was pretty scary. He didn't know where they were going to take him.
And then I think he went to his hotel and just sit there and shook because of how terrifying that moment was.
So it was very, very, very scary. So he's the only person I know of that's ever been kidnapped in Peru and lived to tell about it.
I think that kidnapping made my dad realize that the world out there can be kind of a challenging place, and to make sure not to just blindly trust and believe and we should have the best spirit and support of people, but you also need to have a little bit of a understanding of, are they the right person? Are they trying to take advantage of me? And also just having a better sense of the awareness around him. My dad isn't a fighter in the physical sense, but he is a fighter in the mental sense. He will fight and push and drive things forward and lay himself out there to support and move things where it needs to go in such a powerful way. Boy, I think the sentiment of you get what you can take is so short-sighted. To me, it's so opposite of what I believe. I think the more you can help and support others, the better it will be for you in the long run. And honestly, if you want to make a worldwide kind of impact, to really make a positive impact in the world, the only way you get to that kind of scale is by supporting and helping the people around you that are helping support you. For my dad, this venture was sort of a hybrid. It was a business that was trying to do good. So he was hoping to earn a profit on it. I don't think that profit was extraordinary by any measure, but it was also about the heart of helping these people that he was really passionate to support.
The first apartment building was just the beginning of what is now Norhart. It was an 8-unit apartment cobbled together by the family and a hodgepodge of college students, contractors, and laborers.
Northbrook was the first apartment building that my dad constructed. And after he completed this, because he did it during the summer, he took the winter as a bit of breathing room because it's very intense for him while we were building that building. And I think he just got restless and realized, wow, we could do this again. We could build this up and grow it even further. And I think that sort of thought excited him. This is kind of the person that he was.
Harry's land helped pave the way to taking on larger projects, the projects that have fueled the possibilities for growth. And it's the land where their corporate office has resided for the past decade.
I wish that Ed were here to see this, to see what he started. That what it has turned into. I think he would, I wish he would get the recognition instead of me being the mom of the company. He's really the dad of the company. He would be amazed at where it is, where it's going, or where it is. He would be amazed. I think he would be very proud. He would be certainly so very proud of what Mike has accomplished and what he's done with the company. And he'd sit back and go, wow. He would understand that. And while we would never have taken it to this level, he and I would never have taken it to this level. I think he would be, I know he would be extremely proud of what it's become, where it is now today, what it's become, and what Mike has done.
Brenda always supported Ed's vision, and Lucas always had a willingness to jump in and get the job done.
It's like this momentum was kind of built up in our family. And it is the work ethic that we have, right? You know, I think, I'm not sure where it's at. I'm sure it's said somewhere, but like, success isn't driven by how much you know, right? I mean, how much you know makes getting success a lot easier, but where people are really successful is when they just focus and they keep at it. If you don't stop and you keep at it, you're way more likely to be successful than if you just happen to be naturally gifted and smart. And so I think that work ethic that my parents kind of instilled in my brother and I is what's has allowed us to become successful. And yeah, they exemplified it day in, day out, year in, year out. And I think that's why we've been able to achieve what we're able to achieve. And that's why, you know, we're surrounded by the people we're surrounded with. Oh, and I have to say, you know, it's, of course, we were very fortunate to be surrounded by lots of great friends and family that always kind of came to our aid, you know. When we were younger, there are times where, and I can't remember all of them, but I know there are times where we were having a hard time building something or we needed support. And, you know, as a community, kind of my family, friends would kind of come around us and make sure that we were, you know, successful. They didn't have to, it wasn't required, but they supported us too. So, you know, it's both this work ethic we had plus the people that we were fortunate to be surrounded by. You know, I think that they saw the vision that my dad had, and they saw what my mom, you know, was doing, and they wanted to kind of support that. They wanted us to be successful, and you know, in turn, we would also support them. You know, my mom always had a heart for the people around her, and was always trying to do things for them. So, you know, I think that she was out there helping other people, and then when she came around and said, "Look, we need some help here," I think that they kind of reciprocated that.
And now Mike's leadership has taken the company from what was a family-run operation to a company seeking to dominate the construction industry, changing housing affordability for all.
Like, we did it. Like, we've gotten past this phase in our life. We've gotten to a point now that my dad is on a new trajectory and things are looking up for once in a long time.
But the vision Mike is leading today didn't come easily. Like all things, it was hard won. As the story continues, we get to know the next generation of Kadings, establishing how we went from Kaysen to Norhart. And, of course, there is a girl.
Basically, on that trip, we made it official. We were like boyfriend, girlfriend, and I sometimes joke that I like tricked him into it, but you know, he said, well, that was the best trick.
So much for joining today. I'm so excited to have all of you here. This has been an adventure for us to kind of put this together and actually show off a little bit about what that journey is like, growing to that $1 billion enterprise. Thank you, Claire, for coming on up. We'll actually invite my mom, Brenda, and Alyssa on up for a moment, if you guys would come on up, and open up for questions. And we also have a online audience, too, that may have questions as well. So Claire's curious where we're going to go in the unicorn room. But yeah, we'll open it up. Any questions and thoughts after seeing all that? So how is Norhart Invest going to impact our growth? You know, as we grow, one of the big things that we've seen, at least recently, is rising interest rates, right? We've been able to build buildings at a cost lower than what banks are willing to provide in financing, typically. But now that's changed. With rising interest rates means that banks are more stingy, they're not willing to provide as much resources. And so helping us bridge that gap, helping us pivot, is Norhart Invest, which allows us to bridge that gap and grow at a much larger rate. You know, the dream eventually is to grow nationwide, where we can actually have an impact on housing affordability for everyone. Awesome. Other questions? What is my favorite success? You know, ultimately, I think it comes from some of the greatest failures, because in overcoming those failures is incredible. I think the biggest challenge I had was, and you'll see this in the later episodes, my dad died at a relatively young age, right? So just in a few years after joining the business, I took over, and I don't know if I was entirely ready for that. And at the time, we were building a project called Emberwood, and the city staff had no faith in me. And they probably had right to have no faith in me because I didn't know what I was doing. In fact, they shut us down twice. And it was horrendous. It was really a horrible experience for me. But after getting past that, I remember actually at the end of the project, we had a water main. And the water main had a pinhole leak somewhere in thousands of feet of pipe, buried 15 feet under the ground. And we had to find it. I was out there in the mud with the guys shoveling and digging, trying to find this leak. And just a few days before opening, we'd found the leak. But I remember the city staff coming out and looking and saying, dude, Mike, there's no way you guys are opening on time. And we worked through the night, and a number of you here in the audience actually helped work through the night. And we opened on that last, I remember the very last day, the city inspectors came out, and they did a full day inspection, or a half day inspection with about half a dozen inspectors. And the head building official brought me into the parking garage and pulled me aside and said, Mike,
I know we were hard on you. But honestly, looking at this project now, it's one of the best projects that we have opened up in the city. And here I am this whole time feeling inadequate, feeling like I can't do what we're doing. And we made it through and having some sense of validation. So that's, for me, one of the biggest moments in our journey. Any other questions?
I saw myself in that.
Oh, sure. It's for the online audience so they can actually hear you.
Hi, Mike. My name is Tony. I'm in your shipping department. My question for you is, I've seen that your dad was very interested in electric vehicles. How interested in you are in the new Tesla truck that's coming out?
Oh my gosh, the new Tesla semi. Yeah, my dad was really big into hybrid vehicles. He created that crazy looking car. I am super excited about the Tesla semi. In fact, we've pre-ordered our own, and we're hoping to use that self-driving technology and the electric vehicles to help drive forward what we're doing. So I love it. Thanks for asking. Yes, back here.
Mike, my name's Tom Esch. Why housing, Mike? Why not solar power? Why not homelessness? Why that issue?
You know what's interesting? When you look at the expenses that the average American faces, about a third of our money goes into housing. It's a lot of money. And if you look at the past few decades, the reality is that housing has started rising in expense greater than our income. And if we can truly solve housing affordability, right now we're probably about 20 to 30% less than other developers. We believe we can actually achieve a 50% reduction in cost. But imagine what that means someday. If your rent becomes half, or your mortgage payment becomes half, that could change the landscape for many of us, making the burden on our life easier with that expense going down. And that's really our hope, is to solve that expense for all of us nationwide. My kids are quite wild this morning, or this afternoon. All right, any other questions? Oh, yes.
Darren would like to know where you see the company going in 2 years.
So we are asked, where do we see the company going over the next 2 years? And I'll go a little further than that. Over the next 10 years, our goal is to reach 192,000 units under management with a 60,000 unit per year pace. And the reason we have such a big goal in the long term is because to solve housing affordability, we need to drive up the supply of housing in a way that meaningfully impacts supply and demand, right? More apartments available means that the cost naturally goes down. But here's the magic. It's more than just our own residents. It can become for everyone nationwide, and that's what we're working to solve. Over the next couple of years, we're looking to expand our production rate from about 500 units a year right now to about 2,000 units a year. And we're looking really at doubling that production rate more or less every year. Get my jogging in.
It seems like Norhart started for pragmatic reasons, for financial purposes, and has sort of morphed into a real mission-driven company. Are those two things ever in conflict? Balancing the mission with the financial need to be a going concern, and how do you reconcile that if they are in conflict ever?
Yeah, so the question is there a conflict sometimes between the purpose of what we're trying to do and then just the pragmatic, the financial aspect of things? What I have found is that when you do things according to what you believe and to your purpose, the finances seem to work themselves out. When you see focused solely on finances, if that's all you're trying to do, it doesn't really have a meaningful impact. I talk a lot about with our team is, are we building up a group of people where we just have their hands, right? Are you just coming into work every day to do a job? Or do we have your heart? Because if we can get to that purpose-driven level, that heart-led level, that's when you really start to change the game. The place that probably I hear most in conflict is, hey, Mike, you talk about housing affordability. I went on your website. Guess what? Your rents are just the same as everyone else. And the truth is, that is accurate. See, Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to produce the system that builds the car. We're working on the system that builds housing. Think factories, think lean production systems, think our partnership with Toyota. That's expensive. So what we're doing is we're taking those profits, not from my own pocket, not so we can go on vacation, but pushing it into the system that builds that housing. And over time, our goal, again, is to scale that up in a way that solves housing affordability in a way that doesn't require government financing, that does it in the market sense, actually brings down the cost of housing for everyone. Great questions. Any other questions? Yes. Wouldn't it be nice to have a working second microphone?
Hey, Mike. So I noticed with the Lima story and everything, was that partially did that partially influence you to use recruiters out of the country and stuff like that for your staffing?
So did the Lima experience lead us to hiring recruiters and stuff out of the country? In fact, the truth is about 15% of our staff are international. And the reason we do that is really twofold. The first is that in America right now, it's hard to find great people. It's really hard to hire the right people within the States, just because there's a lot of great jobs, right? There's a lot of places people can go. They're comfortable with where they're at. Unemployment's low. But if you go international, we find is that it's actually easier to find the same caliber of people. And secondly, there's just a lower price point. It's just less expensive to hire internationally. So we do that when it makes sense for certain roles. We've had a lot of success with it. But yeah, I guess maybe the Lima experience and that whole world has helped open our eyes to realize it's more than just Forest Lake. It's more than just the Twin Cities. It's more than just Minnesota. We really want to think about nation or international and how we bring all those components together. Yes. These are great questions. I needed a workout today.
Yeah, I was just curious, in efforts to keep your costs down, are you implementing any renewable energy in your production or your buildings to and taking advantage of the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah, so are we using any of solar and renewables as a way to drive down costs? The short answer is no. The way we drive down costs are things like lean production systems. It's our factories, it's offsite construction. It's the fact that we batch our buildings into small components. But we are very interested in renewables. And so we're bringing solar into our properties. We're looking at renewable energies simply because I think it's the right thing to do. It doesn't necessarily help us solve on cost today, at least. Any other questions? All right. Well, you got a question over here.
Hi, Mike. So this is Ashley. I actually have a question for Mrs. Kading.
Yes.
I want to know, what was it like to raise an entrepreneur, and did she know, or was there expectations that you would take over?
All right, we'll find out the truth now. What was it like raising an entrepreneur, and did you even know that's what was happening?
Well, I married an entrepreneur, and that was totally different than anything that is in my natural bent. I knew something was different when, I don't know if you were in 5th grade or Luke, one of you was in 5th grade, and I said, gee, can I help you with your math? And they looked at me and said, no, we'll wait for Dad. Because I am not the electrical, I'm not the math mind at all. The other thing that was interesting, I remember sitting at dinner and with Ed and the kids, and they would be talking about math problems, like calculus problems. And I was clueless, absolutely clueless. And I thought, whoa, what have I created here? And so they are their father's sons, both of them. So it was interesting for me. Sometimes I didn't always appreciate it, but they're great kids. They're really good. So it was a ride. Let me tell you, it was a ride.
Awesome. Any other final? Oh, got another one.
Ankit asked, you mentioned that being cost effective was the foundation of your family business strategy. Do you believe it's shifting towards differentiation to aid your global vision under your leadership?
So the question was that driving down the costs is a core part of our strategy, and does it help us toward the future, right? There's an interesting transition that happened. I think early on, a big part of driving down costs was being scrappy. It was trying to do whatever we could, working longer hours to bridge that gap. As you grow, as you scale up, that does not work. It does not actually solve driving down the cost of construction. Instead, we think about things, for example, in the world of construction right now, typically you have a variety of different companies working together to build a building. You have a different company that might be doing the subcontractor work, like plumbers, electricians. You have a different company coordinating the construction. You have a different owner. You have different manufacturers. Imagine for a moment if a construction company were to produce cars. You'd have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, and a different company installing the wheel. And then, of course, the wheel company, they would call you up and say, dude, I got delayed in another project. I won't be out there for 2 weeks. Your line would be shut down for that time period. And when they did come out, they would be irate because they could only work on one car at a time. So we brought all of that work under one roof. And once you've done that, we can then start applying some interesting, very simple techniques like the assembly line. See, the world of manufacturing, this is like simple stuff. In the world of construction, it's unheard of. How in the world could you take a building and drive it down a line? Well, you can't. But what you can do is you can take the person and move them through the building. And so right now, it's about every 5 or 6 hours, the teams shift one unit through the building. And that one technique can take a project that may have taken 15 months and drive it down to 9. But there are 10,000 little things like that that the teams are solving to drive down the cost of construction. Yes. Man, you guys are all the way in the back.
Hi, Mike. Jen Nielsen. You are leading in innovation with this company. The fact that you took a construction that went lateral and decided to innovate and go vertical, which is not heard of in the construction industry. And now you've taken, how can I innovate the financial side? And now you've made this investing program, which is amazing. What's your next innovation?
So Jen was saying, okay, well, one of the innovations we did was change the way buildings are done. So instead of building an entire floor and then the second floor and the third floor all the way up, we build it in small vertical slices. It's really to solve a problem around speeding up the speed of construction. And then we're doing things like pivoting as a result of the financial situation and opening up this new investment platform. And I think the reality is that sometimes innovation just comes out of necessity. You run into a problem and you've got to figure out a way around it. You can't just walk away from it. And probably one of the latest things that we're doing now isn't even, I mean, construction's a huge part of what we're doing, but it's this stuff. You know, the big thing we're learning is that I can't solve housing affordability alone. In fact, I can't even do it with just our company. What we need is we need to build a community of people that are, at the very least, emotionally supportive of what we're trying to do. And so we're experimenting now. We're creating our Zero to Unicorn little shorts that you have online that a number of you have been watching. They've been really doing quite well. The Fearlessly Unicorn stuff, this podcast. In fact, we have a second podcast we're working on right now that ties to this, where we actually bring in world leaders that have gone down this journey. One example that we're most likely going to have on is the executive producer of Batman. In fact, he is he owns the movie rights to Batman. Just an amazing guy. His story is incredible. We're excited to share that on this partner podcast that we're creating. But we're doing that because we want to earn the right to build a connection with people, to build a connection with all of you guys. And we're realizing that connection is really valuable in helping us build the right partnerships, relationships, investors, to employees, to just supportive people. That's sort of the next iteration for us that we realize we have to do. Any other questions? Do we have any plans to build in Minneapolis? How do I put this kindly? No, not at the moment. The honest reason there is I'm nervous about the rental limits, the rental rate limits. And again, it's not, we want to solve housing affordability, but if we cap that out and a particular project we do there is actually negative in value, I can't financially put money into the system and be losing money on a project. So I'm nervous about that for those reasons, which is why we're not diving into it yet, but maybe in the future. We are so right now in the Twin Cities, we're getting close to a point of we're one of the largest, if not the largest apartment developer in the Twin Cities. So we've already got a fair amount of scale there. We are actually actively working to scale into Texas right next. We also have a manufacturing facility we're working on in Mexico to help scale us up as well. We have mostly solved a lot of the cost constraints, although we still have more I want to go. Now it's about getting to that 60,000 unit per year level, which is a whole nother challenge. It's a lot of work. Did that answer your question? Do you have a different? Yes. Yes, we do have to keep the system moving in order to improve the system. You can't use lean techniques if you don't have an actively running system. So that is definitely a part of it. And then the goal is to scale that up in a way that we're producing so many units that supply and demand factors hit, and we start seeing pricing overall come down. Was there a question in the back? Yeah. Man, you were in the last row. Everyone likes the back. Yeah, there we go.
Hi, my name's Oliver, and my question is, how far did you think you were going to get at the beginning with Norhart and the apartments?
How far did I think I would get in the beginning? The reality is, I went off to school and I didn't want anything to do with the family business. So I didn't think I was getting all that far. The reason I think deep down is because I didn't want people to think it was given to me. right? Because as a family business, like I wanted to make an impact on my own in some way. But what I realized was that really what I wanted to do was to make a meaningful impact in the world. And like, I just needed to get past my own ego, take what my parents had provided us at that time and use that as a leverage point to grow. But then once I got on board, which took some time, that was a couple of years, once I really meaningfully got on board, we put together a plan of what we thought we could do over basically my lifetime. And we've been on track or ahead of that plan ever since. It's pretty remarkable. If you set out a goal, even if it's crazy, just put it in the stake in the ground, and then you fight tooth and nail to try to make that goal a reality, it can come true. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of late nights to get there. Yes.
We have a question from Lori. She is wondering, does the availability of materials put a kink in the process?
Does the availability of materials put a kink in the process? Absolutely. COVID was really tough. There was lots of materials. I remember windows, resin. Is Tim here? I thought I saw him around. The tubs were a tough thing to get. And pricing went through the roof, right? Wood were like 4 or 5 times as expensive. Steel went through the roof. Maybe it was 10 times. But what I've learned doing this for as long as I have now is that something is going to hit you from somewhere, right? There is going to be problems that hit you in the face. That is normal. That is life. The fact that there exist problems is not an issue. The core issue is, can you solve the problems as fast as they come in? So at a leadership level, oftentimes when we think about our staff, we often think about how do we bring enough problem solvers to solve those problems as quickly as they come in. And we don't always get that right. I think at Norhart Oakdale, there were so many changes that kind of buried us a little bit. But yeah, so the reality is, yes, it was a big challenge. And we had an awesome team to navigate through that during that time. All right, anything else? Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for supporting all that we do. And if you get a chance, we love for you to subscribe and follow our podcast to help build those numbers and build the audience for us. And for those of you watching online, thank you for being here. We're going to wrap up the live part of the presentation now, so thank you.